Have you ever looked at your lab results, seen that section for liver function tests or LFTs, and just wondered what it all really means? Well, you are definitely not alone. So today, let's pull back the curtain and demystify these super common but incredibly important tests.
Right? You see all these acronyms and numbers on the page. Maybe some are even flagged as high or low. But what story are they actually telling your doctor? It's probably one of the biggest questions people have after a checkup. And you know what? It's a great question.
And there's a really good reason why your doctor orders them so often. These tests are a powerful first peek into the health of one of your body's absolute MVPs, your liver. So, what are LFTs really? The best way to think about them is like a diagnostic toolkit. At its heart, it's a screening method, a way for doctors to get a quick snapshot, a sort of health report card for your liver. And this toolkit is incredibly versatile. I mean, doctors use LFTs for just about everything, from detecting a disease you didn't even know you had, to figuring out what type of problem it might be. They also use them to see how severe something is, to track if a treatment is actually working, or even to make sure a new medication isn't putting too much stress on your liver. To really get why these tests matter so much, we have to understand the liver itself. So let's take a little tour. I want you to imagine your liver as this giant multitasking factory, running 24/7, just working tirelessly to keep your whole system in balance. First stop, the liver's manufacturing department. And it is incredible. This place is churning out almost all the plasma proteins that circulate in your blood. It's making most of the crucial factors that help your blood clot when you get a cut. And it's even building the lipoproteins that manage cholesterol. It is literally building the essential stuff your body needs to run smoothly. Okay, next up is the processing and detox department. This is where the liver really shines as a master filter. It's constantly breaking down the nutrients from your food, it's taking toxic stuff like ammonia and converting it into harmless urea so you can get rid of it, and it's processing all kinds of waste products like bilirubin, while also breaking down drugs and toxins. And finally, part of this factory is also a warehouse. Your liver stores all sorts of vital supplies, like glycogen for a quick energy boost, essential vitamins like A, D, E, K, and B12, and even iron. It holds onto them and releases them whenever your body sends out the signal that it needs them. So, with a factory this complex, how in the world do you test it? Well, to figure that out, we need to look at its blueprint. So let's take a quick look inside at the liver's actual structure. First, let's start with the big picture. Your liver is a massive organ, seriously. It can weigh up to 1.5 kilograms, or about 3 pounds. As you can see here, it's got 2 main lobes. Now, when we zoom way in, we start to see these incredible hexagonal shapes called hepatic lobules. You can think of these as the fundamental building blocks of the entire organ. But the real action, the place where the magic happens, is in a unit called the acinus. This is the liver's true functional unit. It's the assembly line, if you will. This is where blood flows past the liver cells to get filtered and processed. All that manufacturing and detox work we talked about, it's happening right here. All right, now that we know the factory's layout, we can finally understand how these tests work. Think of each test as a different status report coming from a different department in our factory. So first up is bilirubin. This is basically a waste product. It's created when your body breaks down and recycles old red blood cells. It's the liver's job to grab this pigment, process it, and make sure it gets escorted out of the body. If bilirubin starts to build up, that's what causes jaundice, that classic yellowing of the skin and eyes. What's really cool is that doctors can use bilirubin levels to figure out where the problem is. For instance, if the issue is happening before the blood even gets to the liver, like with certain types of anemia, they call it pre-hepatic jaundice. If the liver cells themselves are sick, like with hepatitis, it's called hepatic jaundice. And if there's a blockage after the liver, like a gallstone stuck in a bile duct, that's post-hepatic jaundice. See? It's all about location. Okay, so what about checking on that manufacturing department? How do we know if it's running at full capacity? Well, we measure things the liver is supposed to be making. Albumin, for instance, is a super important protein that's made only by the liver. Then there's prothrombin time, or PT, which measures how fast your blood clots, a process that totally relies on those clotting factors made in the liver. Now, here is a really crucial point, and it's kind of mind-blowing. The liver has a massive reserve capacity. A PT test won't even start to look abnormal until the liver has already lost more than 80% of its manufacturing power. That's why a bad PT result is taken so seriously. But what if we want to know if the factory machinery itself is damaged? Are there any alarm bells that go off? You bet there are. For that, we look at two enzymes, ALT and AST. Normally, these guys are kept safely inside the liver cells, but when those cells get injured or burst, these enzymes leak out into the bloodstream, so high levels are a very sensitive alarm for liver cell damage. Now, ALT and AST aren't exactly the same, and the difference is a really important clue for doctors. ALT is found almost exclusively in the liver, so it's a more specific marker. AST, on the other hand, is also found in your heart, your muscles, and other places, so the ratio between the two can be a huge hint. For example, with viral hepatitis, you often see ALT levels spike way higher than AST. But with alcohol-related liver damage, it's often the other way around. The AST is proportionally higher. It's all about the pattern. So, with all this information, you might be thinking that LFTs give doctors a final, clear-cut diagnosis. But that's not quite how it works. It's better to think of them as the critical first clue in a medical investigation.
Yeah, it's super important to remember that LFTs have their fine print, their limitations. For one, they can be perfectly normal even in someone with a serious liver disease like cirrhosis. And like we saw with AST, a weird result can sometimes come from something totally unrelated to the liver, like a muscle injury. So really, LFTs point to a category of a problem, not one specific disease. And that's exactly why your doctor isn't just looking at one number from one test on one day. The real key is the pattern. They're looking at the whole group of tests together, and most importantly, they're looking at the trend over time. A single blip might not mean much, but consistent changes over weeks or months, that tells a story. And this all brings us back to why these tests are just so vital. Because for a significant number of people, an abnormal LFT is the very first warning sign of a serious, sometimes contagious, or even life-threatening condition that absolutely needs to be addressed. So if LFTs are just the first clues, then what does it take to actually solve the medical mystery? Well, they're the opening chapter of the story, giving doctors essential directions on where to look next. Solving the whole puzzle takes a much deeper investigation, but it's the LFTs that get the whole journey started. They're the beginning of the road to an answer, not the end.